Hello, welcome back to my kitchen. My name is Ann Kent. I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist and the owner of Peas and Happiness. Today we're going to do a recipe demonstration of a vegetarian sheet pan meal. This is a one pan dish, and so it's really easy. Last week I wrote about a flexitarian diet, which is an eating pattern that is mostly vegetarian, but occasionally includes some animal products such as meat, cheese, or fish. Now, if you are trying to reduce animal proteins in your diet, I found that it can be a little bit intimidating at first because we're not always used to knowing what kinds of vegetarian proteins there are. So I just want to show you this really simple dish to help you get started. So I've already turned on my oven. Otherwise, we're going to prep everything as we go along. So the oven is set to 450 degrees. This is a test recipe for a peas and hoppy meal guide recipe that will come out later this week. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to prep my potatoes. This is a 30-minute meal, and part of the way that I make it cook in 30 minutes is that I cook the most dense vegetables first, and then I add on the other vegetables as we go along so that it's all ready by the time we're done. So I'm just going to cube these potatoes. You'll notice that I'm not peeling the potatoes, and that's because there is a lot of nutrition in the peel of potatoes. So if you don't mind the potato or the peel of the potato, I would highly recommend that you leave it on. As an added bonus, it saves you a little bit of time because you don't have to peel them. Now, I always do scrub my potatoes because we get them from Miller Farms and they come from the dirt, so they are pretty dusty. If you don't scrub them, then they can be just a little bit gritty when you leave the peel on. So make sure that you scrub them really well. If you're having trouble getting the dirt off, you can also throw them in the sink and just soak them for a little while, and that will help them out. So I'm going to transfer these potatoes onto my large sheet pan. And then I'm going to just toss a little bit of olive oil onto them. So the recipe calls for about 2 tablespoons, which I usually don't measure. We just kind of guess. And I'm going to use my favorite Schitt's Creek spoon that my sister-in-law gave me for Christmas. It has David Rose on it saying, "What does fold in the cheese mean?" And I just love that scene. If you haven't looked it up, look up Schitt's Creek fold in the cheese scene on YouTube. It's hilarious. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put these potatoes with a little bit of oil in my oven. Now, my oven is not up to temperature yet, but that is okay. This is just a way to speed up the meal so that, again, it's all done. So I'm going to let those potatoes in the oven while it's heating, and that's going to help soften the potatoes. And then since it's heated to 450 degrees, it's such a high temperature, we're still going to get a really nice sear on the outside of the potatoes. So next I'm peeling my carrot to go in because it's another of the more dense vegetables. The original recipe does not actually call for carrots, but one thing I really love about these sheet pan meals is that you can substitute basically whatever vegetable you have on hand. They are very flexible. So for example, I did not have a bell pepper in my CSA this week, but we have lots of root vegetables like these carrots, so that's a really good option to use. So I'm just going to trim the ends. I do like to peel these carrots just because I find it's too difficult to scrub them. So I just cut it in half to make it a little bit easier to chop. And then I'm going to cut these in diagonal rounds so that they're have quite a bit of surface area to cook. But I like this shape because it just makes nice bite-sized pieces. You can see that my carrot is pretty large. Again, it came from a local farm, so it's really fresh. Okay, so next is my onion. I'm just going to cut these in half moon pieces. So other vegetables that I'm using today, in addition to the onion, carrot, and potato, I'm also using zucchini. I have a couple of summer squash, and I actually don't know what kind of zucchini this is, but it's a paler zucchini that I'm used to. So substituting other kinds of peppers would work great in this recipe. Also, because this is a recipe that cooks at really high heat. Obviously, we're turning our oven on. So if you want to make this in the summer with some of your summertime produce, but you're not excited about cooking this in your oven because it'll heat up your kitchen, you can also make these into foil packets and then throw them on the grill. So instead of putting them on the large sheet pan, you can just wrap these in aluminum foil You fold up the ends and then you throw them on the grill at 450 degrees. Okay, I've got my onions and my carrots. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull out the potatoes and we're gonna add these to them. Lovely vegetables. All right, and I'm just gonna kind of break these onions apart so that they can cook. I'll toss them together just a little bit. We are going to add some seasoning, but I'm going to do that at the end so that we also season our chickpeas. So you can see that we're starting to get a few more vegetables on our pan, but it's not quite packed full yet. So I'm just going to put that back in the oven. My oven is now up to 205 degrees, so it's, again, not quite ready, but that is okay. So next step, we're going to finally prepare our summer squash because this is going to take the least amount of time to cook besides the chickpeas. Those are also not going to take very long. So I'm going to dice these. The neck is a little bit thinner on some of these crookneck squash, so I'm going to cut those into rounds, but then the rest of it I'm going to cube. So I cut it in half lengthwise, cut it in quarters, and then cut crosswise into cubes. So you could add things like eggplant or broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage would be another option. Basically any vegetable that you can roast, which is pretty much all of them, you could put on the sheet pan and roast together. So I'm going to go ahead and do this with all of my squash, cutting rounds at the end and then cutting the rest into cubes. Okay, I have a giant pile of zucchini here, so we've got lots and lots of veggies. All right, and we're still only at 250 degrees, but the pan is starting to get warm, so it's coming to temperature with the oven. Okay, you can see my beautiful pan of veggies there. Okay, now we're going to add the protein. So for this dish, I'm going to use chickpeas. They're otherwise called garbanzo beans. So all I'm going to do is drain these. I have a colander here in the sink, so I will open these and drain these. Now this is where, again, you can have a lot of flexibility with this recipe. If I'm doing a dish that has animal protein, I have on the Peas and Hoppy meal guides for the healthy plate version, we have chicken on the menu. Just chicken thighs, and so we would cut those into cubes and toss those with the recipe. I also really like to use brats, or you can use steak if you'd like a different kind of protein, just to give you some variety. I've also used pork loin. That's another really easy lean protein. Any of those you would just cut into small cubes and then toss with the rest of your vegetables. So if you are doing a vegetarian meal, of course, chickpeas or black beans or kidney beans, any of the beans are going to be a really, really good source of vegetarian protein. But you could also do something a little bit more fancy, like some pre-made ravioli or some gnocchi, things that you can just buy pre-made in the store and then toss with the vegetables and add it that way. All right. And now I'm going to add a little bit more oil. I'm going to add these chickpeas. If you want extra protein, you could also just add an extra can of chickpeas, no problem. And then we're going to add our spices. So here's some parsley. Technically, the recipe calls for about a teaspoon of each, except for the fennel, which is a half teaspoon. I'm going to measure the salt in my hand so I don't get too much of that, but it also calls for about a teaspoon. I've got a teaspoon there. And just a little bit of fennel. Ooh, and look how excited I got with all my veggies. It's almost too much. This always happens, don't worry. Ooh, but it's looking and smelling so good already. Okay, the timer just went off, so we're gonna check our recipe and see how it's doing. All right, so we can start to see some browning, which looks really, really good. This was in there about 20 minutes. As you can see, there are a lot of vegetables on this tray, so it definitely needed a little bit more time maybe than if it hadn't been so full. The way to tell if it is done, not only to check to see if there's some browning on some of those potatoes, but also we want to poke those veggies, especially the carrots and the potatoes, to see if they are soft, which they just about are. So since I stirred this, I'm actually gonna give it another 5 minutes. I'll put it back in and then we should be good to go after that. All right, I think we are done. Let's check out this recipe. Ha, it looks beautiful. It is sizzling, those potatoes are soft, and we're seeing nice browning on the vegetables. So this is ready to eat. You can serve it as is. You could serve it over quinoa if you'd like a little bit of a heartier meal. And if you want a little bit of variation, add a sauce just to spice things up a bit. If you're interested in reading more about a flexitarian diet, I will include a link to my recent blog post. But that's what inspired today's meal, is just exploring a few options to eat a little bit lower on the food chain. So the reasons why our family has shifted towards this sort of a lifestyle is, number one, because we're not totally committed to being vegetarian or vegan. We really love animal products, and they definitely are helpful to keep us full when we're doing all of our activities and we have a hungry teenage boy. Because animals are higher on the food chain, it takes more energy to produce them. So it's more efficient to eat the plant than it is to eat the animal that ate the plant. And so this is sort of our compromise to reduce our carbon footprint a little bit and also to include some of the foods that we love. So if you're looking to explore some more vegetarian options, I would love to help you out. Let me know if that's something that you're interested in. Feel free to drop a comment or send me a message and let me know what you're looking for. Thanks everybody for joining me, and we'll catch you next week. Bye-bye.